Alright, so the nice thing about these problems is that you don't really have to look too far. The rules are right here, and you'll notice that it centers around you looking at just two values, A and C. Right, so that's what we're looking right here. So the goal is to figure out, well, by looking at the equation only, is it a circle, an ellipse, hyperbola, or a parabola? Right? And how can you do that? And you can do that simply by looking at two values, just A and C. So you look at all of them and says, well, if A equals C, it's a circle. If A and C have the same signs, like positive or negative, that's what they're talking about, plus or minus. So if they're both positive or both negative, we know it's an ellipse. If we have an opposite sign, so if you have a positive and negative or a negative and a positive, we know it's a hyperbola. And if we just have an x squared or a y squared, but not both, we know it's a parabola. Right? So that means either A or C are 0. And A or C are right here. They're the terms on the quadratics. So it's always the numbers you're looking at that are squared. Quadratic means to the second power. Right? Which means, honestly, all this other stuff, you just ignore. It doesn't impact the problem at all. You're looking at only those two values. So it makes it a very nice lesson right after 2 weeks off. Something we can all just get behind here. Do note that it is equal to 0. Okay, so before you do any comparisons of A and C, get it equal to 0 if it is not already. Then do the comparisons, right? And you might have already figured out this pattern and noticed this by, doing our work so far, and we're just formalizing it. So you might look through these really fast and get them without too much effort. So let's look at a few together. Let you do a few on your own. So here, not equal to 0. So the first thing you do is move everything to the left or right. Usually we move everything to the left. So these two will just come down, stay the same. However, all this stuff on the right side will subtract, and that'll put it on the left side, so it becomes a negative 3y squared minus 10y minus 16. And since we've subtracted everything on one side, there is nothing left over, 0, on the right-hand side. Right? As I said before, now that we did all that work, let's just cross off most of the problem. And not worry about it. Compare the A and the C, always next to or the coefficients of the quadratics. Alright, so we have a positive 3, and you have a negative 3. So which shape would that be, looking at all these? Well, if A equals C, nope, they're not the same. One's positive, one's negative. And you just go through the list. Do they have the same signs? No, one's positive, one's negative. Is one of them 0? No. Do they have opposite signs? Yes, we have one positive, one negative. That makes it a hyperbola. So. Alright. So that's just good to know before you even start what you're working with. Alright, go ahead and try B. Right next to it. And what say you? This one's probably a little faster. What do you think this is? Remember, you're only paying attention to the squares. So what do we have? Parabola. Yeah. So in this case, A, right, that's 2. There is no C because it's kind of like it's not there. So think of it as a 0y squared. Right? So that's what we're talking about here. Either A is 0 or C is 0. In this case, the C is 0 because there is no y squared at all. So if you were to graph that, parabola. So if you only have one squared term, either x squared or y squared, you have yourself a parabola. Now the fun thing is that you guys have always graphed like x squared plus 2x minus 5 and did quadratic formula or factored it and got the roots and all this other stuff, the vertex. Well, what happens if it's a y squared? when you start graphing these things. So you're going to find out on Wednesday that we're going to have parabolas that open left and right, not just up and down, right? So we're going to be rotating these things 90 degrees. So that's coming up. A little sneak peek. All right, going down here. Already equal to 0. What do you think this is? That's a 1, by the way. We got a 1. We got a 4. Both positive, same sign. Going back up here. Are they the exact same number? Nope, one's 1. We have a 1 and a 4, so can't be that. Do they have the same sign? Yes, positive 1, positive 4. There you go. You have an ellipse. Yeah, think of these values in front here as how far it's stretched. So if they're stretched the same way vertically and horizontally, 4 and 4, that's why it's circular. If one stretched just 1 in the x direction but 4 in the y direction, well, it's going to be a lot taller in the y direction. That makes it an ellipse. There we go. Got one in the middle here. What do we got? That's a circle. Yeah, stretch the same in both directions, right? Equally in both directions, it keeps it circular. And lastly, got a 5, positive. Got a 4, negative. And that would be, yeah. Spell it correctly. What am I doing here? That's right. Hyperbola. There we go. Okay. So if we can hang with that, we're going to be good for today. And this is like a small part of the homework. The homework will have you probably want to do this, but this is more like a mental thing that you're going to do before you actually start solving it. So on your homework, you're actually going to complete the squares, do everything you did in your homeworks last year, and get the graph for it, right? But you'll know what graph you're going to have before you start. So think of this as like, yeah, I'm writing this out and I'm showing it this way. It soon becomes a mental step, just so if all these problems are all mixed together, you kind of know what direction you're heading before you start. You shouldn't be completing squares and then at the end like, oh wow, it turned out to be hyperbola. Never would have guessed that. You want to know that before you even start, right? That's the reason for all this. It's just the mixing of them together. And then a lot of the other problems are going to be, you guys, like here, the focus is this, and one of the points on the major axis is that. Figure out the equation of the conic section for it. Okay? So let me pass that out right now. So for the last part of this, I want you to open up this Google Classroom assignment called number 42, and then there's a Desmos link is there as well. So when you open that up, it's going to bring up a lot of stuff, right? And you'll notice that there's some things missing. So for number 1, right? So you guys have the question here. The first step was to subtract 144, 144 on both sides, right? And then you divide both sides by 144, and you see these empty blanks here. So you're going to fill those in. So if you do here, you end up with, I think, 16, right? And here you end up with 9. And you'll notice that the two graphs, this is the original question, and here's the answer, they overlap, which means you did all the work correctly and you got the right answer. So if you put numbers in here and it doesn't match the original question, right, because no matter what format it's in, the equation should get you the same exact graph, right? We just don't know how to graph it in this format. That's why we do all this work to put it in this format. Much easier to graph. So just like, you know, back in December, you could do this for every problem, right? So it shouldn't be a question of, well, I don't know if I'm getting it right. It kind of feels like, you know, we should have been graphing all these, you know, completely each time. So that's what I want you to do for each one of these, and just log in, and then you can save it as you go and you can revisit it. So when you get to number 2, you have to put in what you need to put there to complete the square, right? Which comes out to be, what, 1? I think a 1 and 1 actually. Right? And you have to put in the 2 values here. So this is going to be -1. This is going to be +1. Right? And then this is going to be over 16 and over 12. And then to turn off like number 1, you just hit the little folder icon. That turns off number 1, and then you hit number 2. And then you can see, okay, my original equation, that equation, and that equation are all the exact same graph, so I know each of these are correct and equal to one another. So this will help you, again, make sure you're doing these actually correct along the way, and then just hit save each time. And then once you get finished doing all of these, right, you'll hit save one more time, and then you're going to go over here, click share link, copy that link, and turn it in with the Google Classroom assignment. Right, so each of you will have a unique, different link, right, because everybody's doing it themselves. We'll have a different link that you'll turn in. And that way I know for sure that you're checking all these answers and you're getting them right. Now when you get down to these other ones, they're a little bit different questions, right? So let me show you one of those. Skip 3, go to 4. So 4 says, it's a circle. They tell you it's a circle. The center is at -1, 3, and it passes through 3, 0. So I plot those points here. Let's see if I can. So those points are plotted right here. See that? So when you put your equation in, the circle should be the center right here, and it should go through 3, 0. Right? So you just have to put in the values for h, k, and your r squared on the right-hand side, and then a circle will appear that matches those criteria. Same thing down here for all these, like, oh, the foci is at 0, 5, 12, 5, and the end of a major axis is at -2, 5. All right, so I'll turn off 4, look at 5. So I know, okay, I should have an ellipse that this is one of the foci, these are the major axes, and I can get my equation there. So you just have to fill in all the information for each HK and then A and B down here, right? And you can put it as A squared or B squared or just the squared out terms. Either way, as long as it matches. Okay, so something like that. What's that? Number 5. All right, should come out to be 6, 5, and then here would be 64, 28, and you can see if that matches or not, right? So I got the 2 foci right there. This is one point that's on the major axis, right? So yeah, it looks like it fits. So as soon as you put in all the right information, it'll automatically pop up. And then again, hit save, and then you'll just keep on going down and do that for every single one of these. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. It keeps you on a good track, okay? Let me know if you got any questions.